Thank you very much to the organization of today, the Day of Independence of Ukraine. My name is Jakob de Jonge, and I'm the chair of the peace organization, the Hague Peace Projects. Today we not only commemorate the independence of Ukraine, but especially the ruthless attack on its independence, exactly 1.5 years ago. We are confronted daily with the horrors of this war. Almost every Ukrainian nowadays knows one or more people who have died in the terrible fights in the east of Ukraine. And we here in the Netherlands sometimes see the pictures of the thousands of Ukrainian flags waving in the wind over freshly dug graves, where lay young men in the prime of their lives, having left behind their families, their wives and children, their mothers and fathers, their brothers and sisters, their friends and colleagues. In that sense, there is very little to celebrate today, on this Day of Independence. Now, in the case of Ukraine, the concept of independence raises a lot of questions. Looking back into its history, one can ask oneself, was Ukraine ever truly independent? Of course, officially it is an independent country, and its independence is recognized universally. Even before its official independence in 1991, during the Soviet times, Ukraine already had its own separate seat at the UN. However, its geographical position next door to great empires and geopolitical entities made being an independent country always very difficult. During the last 30 years, its biggest neighbor, Russia, has tried to keep Ukraine in line with its own foreign policy interests as a global power. Ukraine was tied in many ways, economically, politically, and culturally, to Russia. So, taking decisions independent of Russian interests has never been easy. So, for that reason, since its independence, a significant part of the Ukrainian people and its politicians have been looking for alignment with Western institutions, such as the EU and NATO, in a desire to gain a truly independent status. And to a certain respect, to a certain degree, that has been successful. Even though Ukraine is not a full member of NATO or the EU yet, the West has become by far the largest sponsor of the Ukrainian government, the Ukrainian economy, and the Ukrainian war effort against the Russian aggression. However, also this current situation of cooperation and deep involvement of the West, namely the US and the EU, raises serious questions about Ukrainian independence. Yes, the West provides weapons to fight against Russia, but at what price? Shouldn't we ask at a moment like this if our Western support is truly aiming to make Ukraine a stronger, safer, and more independent state? Or whether it isn't rather the case that also our own Western imperialism has ulterior and more selfish plans for Ukraine? It's a question to consider. And in that case, we can understand the current tragedy taking place in Ukraine as a new episode of a recurring nightmare that seems to be haunting the Ukrainians for centuries. Not for the first time in its history, Ukraine has yet again become a battlefield between rivaling empires. Before, it was dealing with the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, with the Austro-Hungarian Empire, with Tsarist Russia, with the German Third Reich, with the Soviet Union. And now, yet again, the Ukrainian people have become the victim of great power struggles. The situation today is not very different from those episodes in the past. Yet again, the Ukrainian people have become victim of the rivaling interests of the global powers of Russia, the EU, and the US. And what adds to this tragedy is that in this case, the war is very often fought between former neighbors, colleagues, friends, and even family. I personally know a woman quite well from Ukraine whose own son fights in the Ukrainian army at this moment. But the son of her own brother, who just happened to live a couple of villages further away, his brother fights in the Russian army. And this is not a unique case at all, I know. It happens. It is happening a lot. So where is the way out of this tragedy? This tragic history of Ukraine and its people? Even though we seem to be at one of the darkest chapters of its history, while Ukraine is trying to survive as an independent state, I think there is still hope. Where is this hope? The hope, I think, is in us as ordinary people. In the Ukrainian people, in the Dutch people, as we are here together today. And yes, also in ordinary Russian people. I have the strong belief that ordinary people everywhere have a natural repulsion of violence and a natural desire for peace. People by nature want to socialize, to trust each other, to meet, to talk, to understand. Now, peace, at this precise moment in time, may sound to you like a hollow word, a cheap word maybe. It sounds like a fantasy. It sounds maybe even like defeat. And yes, the word peace can be abused in that sense. When people describe a situation in which there may be no violence, but also no freedom, a situation of oppression. This is not the peace that I'm talking about. I mean peace as an active attitude, a strong and confident mood in people to fix what has been broken between people, to understand past mistakes, talk about it and correct them. A brave and open spirit to confront evil in a non-violent way, with the force of reason, the force of understanding, and the force of dialogue. This way, also Ukraine can be a free and independent nation among nations, a country without enemies but only friendly relations to other nations, a nation that everyone wants to deal with and collaborate with in order to create a common future for all nations. In a way, all citizens of the world have become a victim of this current war. Not only literally, like the people of Ukraine nowadays, but also in a less direct way. The people of Russia and the EU, all of us, we have been subject to propaganda, subject to threats of nuclear destruction, shrinking freedoms, and economic decline. Therefore, I think it is the task of all of us to work very hard and build peace, engage in dialogue. Do not underestimate the power of ordinary people who come together and start talking about their problems and finding solutions. We have to start dialogue among Ukrainians. How do you want to live as a people once the conflict is over? We have to start dialogue among Dutch people. How can we truly support Ukrainian war victims and refugees? How can we become, as the Netherlands, a country that supports peace instead of war? And later, eventually, there will hopefully also be a dialogue between Ukrainians and Russians. How can we keep talking and working together, resisting the urge by all the political elites to use us as ordinary citizens as cannon fodder for their grandiose and illusory projects? Let us try, as hard as it may seem, to stop being afraid and to start engage among ourselves. To start talking among ourselves and with those we perceive as our enemy. Thank you very much.